My fiancé cheated on me with his ex for months, but on our wedding day, she showed up in a white dress and exposed him in front of 150 guests, leaving me destroyed at the altar. I'm 31 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because what happened 8 months ago literally destroyed what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I met Christopher like 5 years ago at a work conference. He seemed perfect, you know? That kind of person everyone wants to be around, charismatic, intelligent, with that sense of humor that makes you laugh even when you're in a bad mood. We started dating after 3 months of going out, and honestly, I thought I had found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. The relationship was amazing the first couple of years, like those 2 years where everything is rosy and you don't fight about anything important. We moved in together after the first year, shared a nice apartment downtown, adopted a cat named Mr. Whiskers, horrible name, but Christopher insisted, and basically built a life together. My parents adored him, especially my dad, who's super protective of me and never likes anyone I date. But with Christopher, it was different. They played golf together on Sundays and everything. My mom always said Christopher was the perfect son-in-law, that how had I been so lucky to find someone like that? And I believed her. Completely. We got engaged like 2 years ago. It was at a romantic dinner he organized at the restaurant where we had our first date. Very cliché, but I loved it. The ring was beautiful. Not too big, but elegant. Exactly what I wanted, even though I had never specifically told him. We started planning the wedding almost immediately because I had always dreamed of getting married young. Well, relatively young. We wanted a spring wedding. Something elegant but not ostentatious, like 150 guests, at a gorgeous venue we found on the outskirts of my hometown. We spent months planning every detail. I got a bit obsessed with the centerpieces and the menu. Christopher handled more of the guest list and the music. Everything was going perfectly until like 3 months before the wedding, Christopher started acting weird. Nothing too obvious at first, like small things that I justified in my head. He spent more time on his phone, got nervous if I approached when he was chatting with someone, went out to make work calls at odd hours. I thought it was the stress of the wedding, because honestly, planning a wedding is exhausting, and Christopher had never been good at handling stress. My best friend Lauren told me that all grooms get weird before getting married, that it's normal to have doubts and nerves, so I didn't give it much importance. But things got weirder when, like 6 weeks before the wedding, Christopher told me that his high school ex, Natalie, had sent him a message asking if she could come to the wedding. I didn't even know they were still in contact, honestly. He told me she had seen the engagement announcement on Facebook. He had posted photos and everything, because I was super excited, and that she wanted to congratulate him and see if she could attend the ceremony. I asked him why his ex would want to come to our wedding, and he told me they had been friends after breaking up, that there was nothing weird about it, that she was married with kids and just wanted to celebrate with us. Something in my stomach felt wrong about that, but Christopher convinced me I was being paranoid and insecure, that Natalie was part of his past, and there was no reason to worry. I told him I didn't feel comfortable with her coming, and he said that was fine, that he'd tell her there wasn't space, which was a lie, because we still had like 20 empty spots. I thought that was the end of it. But like 2 weeks later, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone named Natalie Morrison. I accepted it without thinking much because I thought it was someone from work or a friend of a friend. You know, those things that happen on social media. She sent me a super friendly message saying she was the Natalie that Christopher had talked about, that she completely understood she couldn't come to the wedding, but that she wanted to meet me and be friends because anyone who made Christopher happy was someone she wanted to know. Sounds weird now that I think about it, but at that moment it seemed sweet, like mature and adult. I told Christopher about the message and he got kind of uncomfortable but said it was typical of Natalie to be that friendly, that she had always been a very sociable person. I responded to Natalie with something polite, but kept my distance, because honestly, it still seemed weird to me that my fiancé's ex wanted to be my friend. Lauren told me I was being dramatic, that probably Natalie was just trying to be nice and that I should relax, so I stopped dwelling on it and focused on the final wedding preparations. The week before the wedding was total madness, you know? All those last-minute details you have to resolve. My dress. I needed an additional fitting because I had lost like 3 kilos from stress. The flowers almost got canceled because the florist had a problem with the supplier. Christopher was super stressed with work because he had an important presentation 2 days before the wedding. Basically, neither of us slept well that week, We were irritable and fought over silly things a couple of times. Nothing serious, like arguments about whether the centerpieces went on the right side of the tables or if we had ordered enough white wine. Stupid things that didn't matter but at the time seemed like the end of the world. The day before the wedding, we had the rehearsal and dinner. Everything went perfectly. Christopher was acting normal again, telling me he was excited, that he couldn't wait to see me walk toward him the next day. My parents were happy. My mom cried like 3 times during dinner. My dad gave Christopher a hug and told him to take good care of his little girl. Lauren was there with her boyfriend. My bridesmaids were excited. Everyone was in a good mood. I went to sleep at my parents' house that night, tradition and all that, and Christopher stayed at our apartment with his groomsmen. I remember we talked on the phone like at 11 at night and he told me he loved me, that tomorrow our life together would officially begin, and I fell asleep feeling like the luckiest person in the world. The wedding day dawned perfect, sunny but not too hot, exactly the weather I had been asking for in my prayers. I woke up at 6 in the morning even though the ceremony wasn't until 4 in the afternoon, but I had to do hair, makeup, photos with the bridesmaids, all that. I was nervous but excited, like those good nerves you feel when something important is about to happen. Lauren arrived early to help me, and we spent the morning drinking champagne and laughing and taking silly photos. My mom kept crying every time she saw me in the dress. It was kind of funny, but also super sweet. We arrived at the venue like at 2 in the afternoon to start setting everything up. The place looked beautiful, exactly like I had imagined. The flowers were perfect, the tables decorated amazingly, everything was going well. I saw Christopher from afar when he arrived with his groomsmen, and he looked so handsome in his suit, and I felt butterflies in my stomach like the ones I felt at the beginning of our relationship. The guests started arriving like at 3:30, all dressed elegantly, smiling, taking photos. My dad was nervous because he was going to have to give a speech, and he hates public speaking. But I told him it would be fine, that he just had to speak from the heart. It was almost 4 o'clock when Lauren told me there was a situation outside. I was in the bridal room with my bridesmaids, finishing getting ready, and she came in with a face I had never seen on her. She told me that Natalie had arrived at the venue and was trying to get into the ceremony. I didn't understand anything. Like I asked her which Natalie, and she told me Natalie Morrison, Christopher's ex. Apparently, she had arrived in a white dress. Well, not completely white, but it was light beige or ivory or something like that. Basically, a color you shouldn't wear to a wedding if you're not the bride. Lauren told me that security wouldn't let her in because her name wasn't on the list, but that she was insisting that Christopher had given her permission to come. I didn't know what to do. Honestly, I told Lauren to go talk to Christopher, to find out what was happening. She left and came back like 5 minutes later saying that Christopher was confused, that he hadn't invited her, that he didn't know why Natalie was there. She told me Christopher had gone to talk to her outside to ask her to leave. I tried to calm down, not to let this ruin the day. But I had a bad feeling in my stomach, like that feeling when you know something is very wrong, but you don't want to admit it. The ceremony was going to start in 10 minutes, and Christopher still hadn't come back from talking to Natalie. I was starting to panic. My bridesmaids were trying to calm me down. My mom came in to ask if I was ready, and I said yes, even though I wasn't. Finally, Christopher came back and sent Lauren a message saying everything was resolved, that Natalie had left, and we could start. I tried to compose myself, to focus on the fact that in a few minutes I was going to marry the love of my life, that this little drama wasn't going to ruin anything. The music started and the bridesmaids began walking down the aisle. Lauren was the last one before me, and when she passed by me, she squeezed my hand and told me everything's going to be okay. It was my turn to walk in with my dad. The doors opened, and everyone stood up. I started walking, looking at Christopher at the end of the aisle. He was smiling, but he looked nervous. More nervous than normal. We were like halfway there when I heard a commotion behind me. I turned around and saw Natalie walking down the aisle behind me. I don't know how she had gotten in. Probably she snuck in when they opened the doors for me to enter. She was wearing that ivory-colored dress that was basically a wedding dress, and she was walking toward the altar as if she was the one getting married. People started murmuring. Some stood up. I froze, not knowing what to do. My dad let go of my arm and went toward her to stop her, but she dodged him and kept walking. She got to the altar, stood in front of Christopher, and said loudly for everyone to hear, "Christopher, tell her the truth. Tell her what happened last week." I felt like the floor was moving under my feet, like I literally thought I was going to faint. Christopher turned pale, completely pale, and started saying he didn't know what she was talking about, that she was crazy, that someone should get her out of there. But Natalie didn't move. She looked me directly in the eyes and told me, "He came to my house 5 days ago. Hannah. We slept together. He told me he still loved me, that he had made a mistake getting engaged to you." The silence that followed was deafening, like you could hear literally nothing but my breathing and my heart beating in my ears. I looked at Christopher, expecting him to deny it, to yell at Natalie that she was lying, to do something, anything. But he just stood there, looking at the ground. And in that moment, I knew it was true. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. Lauren ran to where Natalie was and asked her if she had proof of what she was saying, and Natalie took out her phone and started showing her photos. Lauren looked at the photos, then looked at Christopher, then looked at me and told me with a voice I had never heard from her, "Hannah, it's true. There are photos of them together, with timestamps from this week. Everything that happened after is kind of blurry in my memory. Honestly, I remember I screamed at Christopher. I remember I started crying. I remember my dad was trying to get to where Christopher was, but my uncles stopped him. My mom hugged me and took me off the altar while I kept screaming, 'Why? Why did you do this to me?' The guests were in complete shock, some crying, others trying to understand what was happening. Christopher tried to approach me, but Lauren literally got between us and told him not to dare touch me. I ended up in the bridal room again, surrounded by my bridesmaids, all crying with me, trying to console me but not knowing what to say because what can you say in a situation like that? Lauren came in like 10 minutes later and told me she had talked to Natalie outside, that Natalie had shown her all the evidence. Not just photos of them together, but text messages, conversations where Christopher told her he regretted getting engaged to me, that he still loved her, that he wanted them to get back together. Apparently, they had been talking for months, since Natalie sent him that first, a message about coming to the wedding. Everything had been a lie. Absolutely everything. I told Lauren to get everyone out of the venue, that the wedding was obviously canceled. She went out to make the announcement while I stayed there, sitting on the floor in my wedding dress that cost like 20,000 pesos, feeling like the stupidest person in the world. My mom came in and sat with me on the floor, hugging me while I cried and told her I didn't understand how I hadn't realized how I had been so blind. She just told me it wasn't my fault, that Christopher had deceived me, that he was the only one responsible for this. Christopher tried to talk to me like 5 times that afternoon, but I told Lauren not to let him near me. Finally, my dad went to talk to him, and I don't know exactly what he said, but Christopher left the venue and didn't come back. My parents canceled the reception, obviously, returned all the food that could be returned, tried to handle all the logistical mess, while I was in complete zombie mode. Lauren stayed with me all night, took me back to my parents' house because I didn't want to go back to the apartment I shared with Christopher. She helped me take off the dress, the makeup, everything, and we stayed awake until 4 in the morning, while I cried and tried to process what had happened. The following days were an absolute nightmare. Christopher wouldn't stop sending me messages, calling me, begging me to listen to him. He said it had been a mistake, that Natalie had seduced him, that he was confused from wedding nerves, basically all the excuses in the book. I blocked him everywhere, but he started sending me emails, showing up at my parents' house. He even asked mutual friends to intercede for him. I didn't want to know anything. Literally, nothing. Lauren was the one who investigated more deeply with Natalie and discovered that the affair had been happening for months, not just that week. Christopher had been seeing Natalie regularly, telling her he was going to cancel the wedding, that he was just waiting for the right moment to break up with me. The worst part was discovering that Christopher had been manipulating our mutual friends. Stories started coming out that he had been telling them I was controlling, that he had me trapped, that he felt obligated to marry me because we had already spent so much money on the wedding. Some of those friends stopped talking to me because they believed him, and that hurt almost as much as the initial betrayal because they were people I considered close. Lauren was incredible during all this. She sent a mass message to all our friends, explaining exactly what had happened, including the evidence that Natalie had provided, and basically forced everyone to choose a side. Several of them apologized to me later, said that Christopher had been manipulating them for months, but the damage was already done. I changed the locks on the apartment like 2 weeks after the failed wedding, when I finally had the courage to go back there. Christopher had tried to get in like 3 times using his key, and I didn't feel safe knowing he could enter whenever he wanted. I also changed my phone number because he wouldn't stop calling me from unknown numbers. My dad had a very serious conversation with Christopher, where he basically told him that if he didn't leave me alone, he was going to get a restraining order. Apparently, that was enough for Christopher to understand that everything was really over, because after that, he stopped trying to contact me directly. But the story didn't end there because it turns out Natalie wasn't completely stable either. After ruining my wedding, apparently she thought Christopher was going to run into her arms and they were going to live happily ever after. When Christopher rejected her, because obviously he didn't want anything to do with her after what she had done, she started stalking him too. She sent him messages saying she had done it, for him, that she had saved his life from making a mistake, that they were destined to be together. Christopher sent me a message before I changed my number, basically complaining that Natalie was a psychopath and that he couldn't believe what she had done. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, like he had ruined my life, but now he was crying because Natalie was ruining his. I spent like 2 months without leaving my parents' house except to go to work. I asked to work from home as much as I could, because I couldn't stand the idea of running into people who had been at the wedding, who had seen my public humiliation. My coworkers were super understanding. My boss gave me 2 weeks of paid vacation to recover. But honestly, I don't know if you ever completely recover from something like that. You know, from having the person you trusted most betray you in the most public and humiliating way possible. Lauren convinced me to go to therapy like 3 months after everything. I didn't want to go because I had this stupid idea that going to therapy meant I was broken or something. But she told me everyone needs help sometimes, that there's nothing wrong with talking to a professional. So I started going to weekly sessions with a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal in relationships. The first sessions were brutal. Like I basically just cried for the entire hour without being able to articulate much. But eventually I started processing what had happened, understanding that none of this had been my fault, that Christopher was the one with serious problems. I decided to move out of the apartment we had shared because I couldn't stand being there. Every corner reminded me of him and our life together that turned out to be a lie. Lauren helped me pack all my stuff, and we had a kind of silly but cathartic ceremony where we burned photos of Christopher in my parents' backyard. My mom thought we were crazy, but let us do it anyway because she knew I needed it. I found a small apartment closer to downtown, a place that was completely mine, where there were no memories of Christopher or what had happened. The hardest thing was rebuilding my trust in people, especially in romantic partners. I went out with a couple of people the following months, but I always ended up sabotaging the relationship because I couldn't stop thinking they were going to betray me, that they were going to lie to me like Christopher had. My therapist told me it was normal, that I needed time to heal, that I didn't have to rush into another relationship if I didn't feel ready. So I stopped forcing myself to date people and focused on myself, on rebuilding my life, on remembering who I was before Christopher. Like 6 months after the canceled wedding, they offered me an incredible job in another city, a promotion with a really good salary increase. At first I hesitated because it meant leaving my family and Lauren, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was exactly what I needed. A fresh start, away from all the memories and the drama. I accepted the job and moved like 2 months later. It was hard to leave my parents and Lauren, but everyone understood I needed to do this for myself. Christopher finally stopped trying to contact me after I moved. I heard from mutual friends that his life was also a mess, that his family was embarrassed by what he had done, that he had lost several close friends who couldn't believe he had been capable of something like that. A small part of me felt satisfaction knowing there were consequences for his actions, but honestly, most of me just wanted to forget he ever existed. Natalie apparently also disappeared after everything. Nobody knows what happened to her, and honestly, I don't care to know. Now, 8 months later, I'm in a much better place. I'm still in therapy because it turns out processing this kind of trauma takes time. Much more time than people think. I still have bad days where I question if I did something wrong. If I could have seen the signs earlier. If I somehow caused Christopher to cheat on me. But my therapist always reminds me that nothing I did or didn't do justifies what he did, that the decision to cheat on me was completely his. I've started dating someone new, very casually, nothing serious. He's a good person, patient with my insecurities and my trust issues. I don't know if it's going to become something more, but for now it's okay like this. Like taking small steps toward learning to trust again. Lauren comes to visit me every month. We get drunk on wine and laugh about everything that happened because if you don't laugh, you go crazy, right? My parents are proud of how I've handled everything. My dad told me recently that I'm stronger than he thought. That not just anyone recovers from something like that. Did Natalie ruin my wedding day? Absolutely. Did it emotionally destroy me for months? Without a doubt. Did it make me question everything about myself and my ability to judge people's character? Completely. But also, in a twisted way, she saved me from marrying someone who didn't deserve me, who had been lying to me and manipulating me for months, if not years. I could have discovered the truth after we got married, when it would have been much more complicated to get out of the relationship, when maybe we would have had kids or a mortgage together. So, I guess on some level I owe Natalie for saving me from that, even though the way she did it was cruel and completely unnecessary. Last week, I found my wedding dress stored in a box in the closet. I hadn't realized my parents had brought it when I packed to move to the new city. I looked at it for a long time, thinking about everything that dress represented, all the hopes and dreams I had when I bought it. I thought about donating it or selling it, but for now, I'm going to leave it there. Maybe someday I'll donate it to an organization that gives wedding dresses to women who can't afford to buy one, or maybe someday I'll throw it away completely. For now, it's okay to leave it there. A reminder that I survived something I thought was going to destroy me, and that I came out stronger on the other side.